can you believe it? My own father standing there, looking at me, his own daughter, lying broken, burned in an ICU bed, and he said it. He actually said, pull the plug, we can't afford 2 kids. My sister, my twin sister, was in the room next door, just as bad off as I was. We'd just survived a house fire barely, and his first thought, his first words, were about money and choosing which one of us lived. Tell me, honestly, what would you do if your dad said that to you? How do you ever look at him the same way again? It all started, I guess, on what was supposed to be a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. My name is Alice, and my twin sister is Lily. We were 16 at the time, inseparable as twins often are. Our lives weren't perfect, not by a long shot, but they were ours. We lived in a modest, slightly run-down house with our parents. Our mom, Sarah, was a kind but perpetually stressed woman, working 2 part-time jobs to help make ends meet. Our dad, Robert, was, well, he was complicated. He was a salesman, always chasing the next big commission, always talking about a get-rich-quick scheme that never quite materialized. He loved us, I think, in his own way, but his love always felt conditional, always tied to something else, usually money or convenience. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we always had food on the table, clothes on our backs, and a roof over our heads. What we lacked in material possessions, Lily and I made up for with each other. We were each other's best friend, confidante, and partner in crime. We shared everything, secrets, dreams, even our clothes, much to Mom's exasperation. We had our squabbles, of course, what sisters don't. But at the end of the day, we were a unit. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Mom was at work, Dad was out, networking, which usually meant he was at the local bar, charming potential clients or, more often, just drinking with his buddies. Lily and I were in our shared bedroom, typical teenage chaos surrounding us. I was attempting to do my geometry homework, which was proving to be an exercise in frustration, while Lily was engrossed in a new fantasy novel, sprawled on her bed, a half-eaten bag of chips beside her. The air was warm, and a gentle breeze was coming through our open window, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from Mrs. Henderson's garden next door. We were bickering playfully about who got to use the computer next, a nightly ritual. Lily wanted to look up fan theories for her book, and I needed to finish an essay. It was a mundane, forgettable moment, the kind you don't appreciate until it's gone. Suddenly, a strange smell permeated the air. It wasn't the usual cooking smells from Mrs. Henderson's, or the faint scent of Dad's cigar from earlier. This was acrid, sharp, like burning plastic, and something else is something chemical. Do you smell that? Lily asked, her nose wrinkling, pulling her away from her book. I sniffed the air, my brow furrowing. Yeah, what is that? It smells like electrical. Before we could even process it, the smoke alarm, which we hadn't even realized was functional, shrieked, a piercing, insistent sound that cut through the peaceful evening. Almost simultaneously, we heard a muffled thump from downstairs, followed by a crackling sound that grew louder, more menacing, with each passing second. Panic, cold and swift, began to coil in my stomach. Fire, Lily whispered, her eyes wide with fear, reflecting my own terror. We scrambled out of our room and into the hallway. Smoke was already billowing from downstairs, a thick, dark cloud that stung our eyes and burned our throats. The air was getting hotter, the crackling louder, more ravenous. Our minds, usually sharp and quick-witted, were a blur of primal fear. The front door, I choked out, pulling Lily's arm. We stumbled down the smoke-filled stairs, coughing and wheezing, trying to stay low to the ground as we'd learned in some forgotten school fire drill. But as we reached the bottom, the living room was an inferno. Flames licked at the curtains, danced across the old rug, and climbed the walls with terrifying speed. The heat was unbearable, pushing us back. The front door was completely engulfed. We were trapped. The back door, Lily screamed, her voice raw with smoke. We turned, our only thought survival, and tried to make our way through the kitchen. But the fire had spread with horrifying speed. A light sirocicas overhead made us look up just as a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending a shower of burning debris down onto the kitchen floor. A flaming beam fell, blocking our path to the back door, and cutting us off from each other for a terrifying moment. I remember crying out for Lily, a desperate, raw sound that was swallowed by the roar of the fire. The heat was intense, searing my skin, and the smoke was so thick I could barely see, barely breathe. I don't remember much of what happened next, only flashes, the feeling of being incredibly hot, the terrifying orange glow, the desperate search for Lily through the choking smoke, the agonizing pain. I remember hearing sirens in the distance, a sound that brought a flicker of hope before everything went black. The next thing I truly recall is waking up in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils, the incessant beeping of machines my only company. My entire body felt heavy, aching, as if I'd been run over by a truck. My throat was raw, and my skin felt stretched and tight. I tried to move, but a dull pain shot through my arm, and a nurse was immediately at my side, her face a blur of concern. "Easy, easy dear," she said gently, her voice soft and soothing. "You're in the hospital. You've been in a fire." That's when the memories started to trickle back, horrifying and vivid. The flames, the smoke, the heat, Lily's terrified scream. Panic surged through me. "Lily," I tried to say, but only a raspy whisper emerged. The nurse understood. "Your sister is here too. She's in the ICU just like you. Both of you were very lucky to get out." Lucky. That word felt like a cruel joke. I was bandaged almost everywhere, a breathing tube in my nose and IV in my arm. My skin felt like it was on fire, despite the pain medication. I learned later that I had suffered second and third degree burns over 30% of my body, mostly on my arms, legs, and back. My lungs were damaged from smoke inhalation, and I had several fractured ribs from being hit by falling debris. Lily, they told me, was even worse. She had more extensive burns, especially on her face and hands, and severe smoke inhalation. She was on a ventilator, in a medically induced coma. My parents were there, of course. Mom was a wreck, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her face etched with exhaustion and worry. She held my hand, tears streaming down her face, murmuring apologies and reassurances. Dad was different. He looked pale, stressed, but his eyes held a calculating glint I hadn't seen before. He asked about the house, about the insurance, about the extent of our injuries in terms of future medical costs. He kept bringing up money, money, money. It was almost obsessive. I was too weak, too drugged, to really process it at the time. But a cold unease settled in my heart. The days that followed blurred into a painful routine of medication, doctor visits, and physical therapy. The pain was constant, a dull throb that occasionally flared into an agonizing inferno. The worst part was knowing Lily was in the same hospital, fighting for her life, and I couldn't be with her. They wouldn't let me see her, said it was too soon, too risky for both of us. The guilt was immense. We were twins, we were supposed to be together. And now, she was alone, fighting. I clung to every piece of news about her, every update the nurses or my mom could give me. "She's stable," they'd say. Still critical, but stable. It was a mantra that offered little comfort. Dad's visits became more frequent and more unsettling. He'd sit by my bed, not talking much, but constantly on his phone, muttering about bills and financial burdens. He complained about the hospital forking, about the perceived slowness of the insurance company. He never once asked how I felt, or if I was in pain. Only if the doctors were doing everything they could to speed up recovery. It was always about the money. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that he was just overwhelmed. But deep down, a seed of doubt was planted, growing larger with each passing day. My mom tried to mediate, tried to make excuses for him, but even she looked increasingly worn down by his relentless focus on finances. One afternoon, about a week after the fire, when I was starting to regain a bit more strength and clarity, my dad came into my room alone. Mom had just left to get a coffee. He pulled up a chair, his face grim, and looked at me with an intensity that made me shrink back into the pillows. "Alice." He started, his voice low, almost a whisper. "We need to talk." I braced myself. I thought he was finally going to tell me how much he loved me, how proud he was of me for surviving. But that wasn't what came next. "The hospital bills are astronomical," he said, shaking his head. "The insurance isn't covering nearly enough, and with the house gone, we're in a really bad place." I just stared at him, my heart beginning to pound. What did this have to do with me? "We can't afford this, Alice. We can't afford two of you." My breath hitched in my throat. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of his cold, calculated tone. He continued, oblivious to the terror in my eyes. "Lily, she's worse off. The doctors say her chances are slim. And even if she does make it, she'll require constant care, multiple surgeries, physical therapy for years. Her quality of life." He trailed off, shaking his head again, as if the very thought was an inconvenience. "You, on the other hand, you're recovering faster. Your burns, while serious, aren't as extensive. You'll need grafts therapy, but you'll have a good quality of life. You'll be able to function, to eventually get a job, contribute." He took a deep breath, and then the words that would haunt me forever, fell from his lips like poison. "Alice, they've asked about end-of-life decisions for Lily. They want to know what we want to do. And well, we can't afford both. We just can't, it's too much. For your mother, for me, for your future. If we focus all our resources on you, you have a chance at a normal life. If we try to save Lily, we'll lose everything, and she might not even make it." So, I need you to understand. We need to pull the plug on Lily. It's the only way we can afford to keep you alive, to give you a future. You're the stronger one. The world spun around me. Pull the plug. On Lily, my other half, because we couldn't afford 2 kids. Because I was the stronger one. It was like a cruel, twisted nightmare. I felt a scream building in my chest, but my voice was still weak, barely audible. No, I managed to rasp, tears welling in my eyes, blurring his already distorted face. No, Dad, how can you say that? He leaned closer, his eyes cold and devoid of emotion. It's a practical decision, Alice. A hard one, but necessary. Your mother isn't strong enough to make it. But I need you to agree, it has to be a family decision. She's suffering, Alice. And this way, you get to live. He was trying to rationalize it, to make it sound like an act of mercy, but all I heard was the chilling truth. He was choosing me over Lily, not out of love, but out of financial desperation. He was asking me to agree to murder my own sister to save himself from financial ruin. I started to cry, silent tears that burned my bandaged cheeks. You can't, she's my sister. She's your daughter? He sighed an exasperated sound, as if I was being unreasonable. Don't be dramatic, Alice. This is reality. You need to be strong for me and your mother. You need to understand. He kept pressing, kept trying to rationalize his monstrous request. I couldn't breathe, my chest tightened, and I felt like I was suffocating, not from smoke this time, but from my father's unimaginable cruelty. He stood up, his face still grim, and said, "Think about it, Alice. Think about your future. Think about what's best for the family." And then he walked out, leaving me alone with the impossible choice he had just laid at my feet. The beeping of the machines in my room suddenly sounded like a death knell. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, the words echoing in my ears, bouncing off the sterile walls. Pull the plug. We can't afford 2 kids. My own father, the man who was supposed to protect us, to love us unconditionally, he was willing to sacrifice one of us for money. My mind raced, jumping from disbelief to horror to a burning incandescent rage. How could he, how could anyone, especially a parent, make such a demand? Lily, my sweet, funny, brilliant Lily, she was fighting for her life, and he wanted to cut it short. My sister was still in ICU, fragile, vulnerable, and he was already calculating her worth in dollars and cents. The thought alone was nauseating. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I could never, ever agree to such a thing. Lily was not a financial burden, she was my sister, my other half. If I agreed, even silently, I would be complicit. I would be living a life bought with her death. And that was a burden I could never bear. The choice wasn't just about Lily's life, it was about my own soul. It was about what kind of person I was, what kind of family we were. Was our love truly so conditional? Was our worth truly measured by our economic viability? The next time my mom came into my room, I told her everything. Every single word Dad had said. I watched her face crumple, the color draining from it. She started to sob, her body shaking uncontrollably. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But I saw in her eyes that she knew it was true. She knew her husband, knew his ruthless pragmatism, his obsession with money. She knew he was capable of this monstrous act. My mom was heartbroken, torn between her love for her husband and her overwhelming grief and horror at his proposal. It was a terrible revelation for her, a final, brutal stripping away of any illusions she might have held about him. We cried together, silently, 2 broken women in a sterile room, brought together by one man's unimaginable cruelty. From that moment on, a shift occurred. My mom, usually timid and deferential to my father, found a strength I had never seen in her. It was as if his words, meant to divide and conquer, had instead forged an unbreakable bond between us. She became fiercely protective of Lily, spending every waking moment at her bedside, talking to her, reading to her, willing her back to life. She stopped trying to mediate Dad's behavior, stopped making excuses. She simply ignored him, her focus entirely on her daughters. She began to ask more questions of the doctors, to research Lily's condition, to explore every possible option. She took control, and it was a revelation. As for me, the fire had taken much, but it had also given me a clarity of purpose. I was going to fight for Lily, with every ounce of strength I had. My physical therapy became less about regaining function and more about preparing for a battle. I pushed through the pain, gritted my teeth, and focused on getting stronger, faster. I needed to be well enough to stand by my sister, to be her voice if she couldn't speak, to be her advocate. The anger at my father fueled me, an intense, cold fire that burned away my fear and replaced it with determination. The hospital social worker, a kind woman named Mrs. Peterson, noticed the tension, the quiet despair in my mom's eyes, the sudden, fierce protectiveness that radiated from me whenever my dad was around. She pulled my mom, gently asking if everything was okay, offering support. My mom, emboldened by my own unwavering resolve, confided in her. Not everything, not immediately, but enough to raise red flags. Mrs. Peterson, a seasoned professional, listened with growing concern. She started observing my dad, his dismissive attitude, his constant inquiries about costs, his lack of emotional connection to either of us. She began to connect the dots. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. How do you deal with a parent who wants to sacrifice one child for the perceived benefit of another? Would you have confronted him? Gone to someone else, or would the sheer shock have paralyzed you? I knew I couldn't just let it go. My dad's suggestion wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was a cold, calculated plan. He had genuinely considered it, and was pushing for it. I was getting stronger, well enough to be moved out of the ICU and into a regular burn unit. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about my recovery, albeit with a long road of surgeries and therapy ahead. Lily, however, remained in critical condition, her prognosis still uncertain. My dad continued his relentless campaign, subtly at first, then more overtly, telling my mom and me that we needed to be realistic, that we couldn't drain all our resources on a lost cause. His words felt like a physical blow every time. Mrs. Peterson, the social worker, proved to be an unexpected ally. After my mom's initial confession, she started a quiet investigation. She observed my dad's interactions, noted his conversations with the medical staff, especially when he inquired about Lily's quality of life, and the financial implications of her continued care. She began to build a case, carefully, methodically. She spoke to Lily's primary doctor, gently probing about the decision-making process for end-of-life care, asking about family dynamics. The doctor, already somewhat uncomfortable with my dad's detached inquiries, started to pay closer attention too. The climax arrived in a flurry of hushed conversations and growing tension. My dad, impatient with what he perceived as my mom's and my emotional resistance, decided to escalate things. He scheduled a meeting with Lily's medical team, ostensibly to discuss her care plan, but in reality, I knew, to push for his agenda. He informed us he was going alone, but Mom, newfound resolve hardening her expression, insisted on being there. I too insisted. I was still weak, but I told the nurses, told my mom that I had to be there for my sister. Mrs. Peterson, sensing the impending confrontation, made sure she was also present, ostensibly as a support person for the family. The meeting room was small, sterile, and filled with an unbearable tension. Lily's main physician, a kind but very direct woman named Dr. Evans, sat across from us, along with a few other specialists. My dad launched into his spiel almost immediately, his voice calm and rational, outlining the possible financial situation we were in, the poor prognosis for Lily, and the burden her continued care would place on everyone. He spoke about me, about my potential, as if I were an investment that needed protecting. He used all the right medical jargon, making it sound like a logical, compassionate decision, a necessary sacrifice. My mom sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale. Then, it was my turn. My voice was still a little raspy, but I spoke with a strength I didn't know I possessed. I looked directly at my father, and then at Dr. Evans. My sister, Lily, is a fighter. She is not a burden, and her life is not measured in dollars. My father is not speaking for me, and he is not speaking for my mother. We want every single possible thing done to save Lily. Every treatment, every surgery, every chance. We will not, under any circumstances, agree to pull the plug. Lily is our family, and we will never give up on her. My mom, tears streaming down her face, nodded vehemently beside me. She's right. My mom choked out. Well, Dr. Evans looked from my dad's impassive face to my determined one, then to my sobbing mother. Her expression hardened. Mr. Davies, she said, her voice firm. We are ethically bound to provide the best possible care for all our patients. While we understand the financial stresses, the decision to withdraw life support is an incredibly serious one, requiring the full and unambiguous consent of all immediate family members, and it must be based on medical futility, not financial considerations. Based on the mother and sister's expressed wishes, and the current medical assessment, which indicates a chance, however small, of recovery, we will continue with all active treatments for Lily. My dad's face went white. He opened his mouth to argue, to plead, but before he could, Mrs. Peterson stepped in. Mr. Davies, she said, her voice calm but authoritative. I've also been made aware of certain concerns regarding the family's financial discussions and their potential influence on medical decisions. I will be documenting these concerns. I also strongly advise that you seek independent legal counsel, regarding the implications of making such suggestions to your minor daughter and wife concerning another minor child's life. The implication was clear: he was being investigated. The air in the room became thick with unspoken accusations. My dad, for the first time, looked genuinely shocked and cornered. The doctor and social worker were clearly on our side. That meeting was a turning point. My dad's influence was effectively neutralized. He stopped coming to the hospital as frequently, and when he did, he stayed quiet, his previous assertiveness replaced by a sullen resentment. The hospital staff, now fully aware of the situation, kept a closer eye on him. My mom, emboldened by the support of the medical team and my unwavering stance, began to take charge of Lily's care, making decisions, researching, advocating, and slowly, agonizingly slowly, Lily began to show signs of improvement. A flicker of an eyelid, a faint squeeze of a hand, a slight dip in her fever. Small victories, but monumental to us. The next few months were a blur of recovery for me and a desperate vigil for Lily. I underwent several skin graft surgeries, enduring painful physical therapy to regain movement and minimize scarring. Each day was a battle, but the thought of Lily, fighting her own battle, kept me going. I would often be wheeled to her bedside, sitting there, holding her hand, talking to her, telling her stories, sometimes just crying silently. I knew she could hear me. I truly believed it. And then, one day, she opened her eyes. It was a moment I will never, ever forget. My mom and I were both there, and when those beautiful, familiar eyes, slightly swollen and red but undeniably Lily's, blinked open, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy crashed over us. She was back. Lily's recovery was long and arduous. She had extensive burns, especially on her face and hands, and her lungs were severely damaged. She needed countless surgeries, skin grafts, and years of intense physical and occupational therapy. She faced challenges that would break most people, but she faced them with an incredible strength and resilience that was truly inspiring. We were told her appearance would be permanently altered, that she would never fully regain the use of her hands. But she defied expectations, pushing herself every single day. My mom became her unwavering advocate, her fiercest protector, researching every new treatment, every cutting-edge therapy. She was a different woman, transformed by the fire, by my father's betrayal, and by her boundless love for her children. As for my dad, he eventually moved out. The rift created by his words was too wide, too deep to bridge. My mom couldn't forgive him and neither could I. He eventually initiated divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences. It was a relief, honestly. The tension, the unspoken accusation, the shadow he cast over our recovery, finally lifted. But we gained something far more valuable: peace, and each other. The insurance money, meager as it was, and a lot of help from charitable organizations and community fundraisers, helped cover some of the initial costs. My mom found a better, paying job, and we moved into a smaller, cozier apartment. It was a fresh start, albeit one marked by visible scars, both physical and emotional. Lily and I, though forever changed by the fire, grew even closer. Our bond, already strong, became unbreakable. We faced the world together, scars and all. We learned to live with our new realities, to adapt, to find joy in the smallest things. Lily, despite her physical limitations, went on to become an incredible artist, using adaptive tools to create breathtaking sculptures. Her art was raw, emotional, and spoke of resilience and transformation. I pursued a career in medicine, fueled by a desire to help others who had faced similar traumas. We didn't just survive, we thrived. And we did it without the man who had been willing to sacrifice one of us for his own selfish reasons. Looking back, the fire took our home, our sense of safety, and our innocence. But it also forged a new path, a new understanding of family, love, and what truly matters. My father's words, intended to destroy, instead became the catalyst for our strength, for my mom's courage, and for Lily's incredible fight for life. It was a horrific experience, but it taught us that love is not conditional, and life is priceless, regardless of its perceived cost. So, that's our story. It's a messy, painful, and ultimately triumphant one. What do you think about it? Was my dad a monster, or just a desperate man? Would you have been able to forgive him? Like this video if you were on my side, if you believe that every life is worth fighting for. Subscribe for more stories like this, where people face unimaginable challenges and find the strength to overcome them. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I read every single one. I'll see you all in the next story.